We have a few names. We're just going to predict where we think they should go and maybe where they will go. So, Kyle, I want to kick us off. We got Zach Bond. Where do you think
Zach Bond? I think it's a no-brainer. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles have to find a way to retain this guy, get him taken care of, maybe give him a double locker setup in the locker room. He was that much of a badass last year. And you got to think a guy that just switched positions, had a new coordinator last year. With the success he had, he's only going to get better. And when you've got a guy in the middle of the football field like that has the ability to affect all three levels of the field, the value there is priceless. So whatever you got to pay to get Zach Bond to be a Philadelphia Eagle, try to run this thing back, make it happen.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, like, from a lot of perspectives, it makes sense for him to come back, right? He knows how the other half lives in terms of being miscast. He knows that linebacker in his situation behind that defensive line is a lot easier to play, and he'll have a lot more accolades. But he's also 28 years old. This is his one bite of the apple because he was a mid-round pick, right? Third rounder. Didn't get much run, had a really small contract this past year. So this is his one swing. I could see him just going top dollar, not giving any sort of hometown discount. So I think he should end up with the Eagles. I'm betting on anyone, it's the Eagles, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone went after him with a big bag after how good he was last year. And he just said, you know what? I could use the $40, $50 million or whatever someone's going to throw at him. Next one.
I think he's great. You got to find a way to sign him. I mean, I hated playing against defenses that had an organized second level that communicated well and were playmakers. It was tough. I think about guys like Luke Kuechly, and they ruin every play.
Jets cornerback DJ Reed. Where will he and where should he end up?
So I did a little, I looked at our rundown and I saw what you put in there, and I agree with where he will end up, but I think that he should end up with his old guy in San Francisco. I think that would be a great landing spot for a guy like DJ Reed. Switch coasts, switch scenery, have the opportunity to get out of that toxic cesspool in New York and have the opportunity to play in a program like John Lynch's in San Francisco would be really cool. But I definitely think that the team that would benefit the most from having a guy like DJ Reed would be the Detroit Football Lions. I mean, they just need help on the back end, and any help would be welcome. DJ Reed, a really good player. So I'm interested to hear how you sort this thing out.
Yeah, I think Reed's such a feisty press corner. I would love for him to end up on the Lions, but I fingers crossed. I'm manifesting Green Bay Packers.
Yeah,
he will end up.
That would piss me
off.
Think
they have enough space. I think they're going to make a few splashes like they did last year. Maybe not as big, but DJ Reed at his age, 28-year-old corner, I don't think will cost an arm and a leg. I'll just say. Next one, Vikings cornerback Byron Murphy. I think he's staying with the Vikings. I think he's too important with what he does there in the slot. Really difficult to replicate a guy who can play man coverage at that level. So I think he's ultimately a Viking. What say you?
Yeah, really smart player. The ability to do so many different multiple things with him. You talked about where he lines up. That involves him in the middle of the field, on the perimeter of the field. And I think for a guy like that, who's such an integral part of that system, you got to find a way to maintain his spot there. It's similar to that Zach Bond. I mean, different positions, but the importance level is there for Byron Murphy Jr.
All right, next one, Dolphins safety Javon Holland. Dude, if the Dolphins let Christian Wilkins and Javon Holland walk in back-to-back years, legitimately, when you draft a first and a second rounder, your ideal scenarios, right? Like they are home runs through and through, should be franchise cornerstones on the defensive side of football. If you let those two guys walk, that is gross mismanagement from a front office perspective. So he should be a Dolphin. Now, will he be? I don't think there's any chance at this point. I think they've kind of made their bed, unfortunately. I live in fear, though, of him ending up a Minnesota Viking because obviously Brian Flores drafted him. He's one of the most versatile safeties in the NFL. And the Minnesota Vikings going from Harrison Smith to him, I live in fear.
And it just felt like forever and ever and ever and ever and ever that Hitman Harry was back there playing at a high level. And, you always, when you're watching the Vikings and you see him making plays at or around the line of scrimmage, you're like, how long can this guy do it? Well, we've reached that point now where there's the answer to that question. And to your point, as an NFC North member not wearing purple, I would hate to see this guy end up in that defense. And you also brought up the fact that Brian Flores drafted him. There is a lot of importance there with when you bring a guy into the league, you have that You have pelts on the wall with that player. If you go elsewhere, you're always looking to get your players back. I could totally see him ending up in Minnesota. But Miami, they've given up a lot of superstars, so let's not give up another one. And Tyreek Hill's walking out the door too, so add him to the list.
Harrison Smith, funny story about him. I played him at the rec center, Notre Dame. I think he was a little older than me, maybe 1 or 2 years. Pump faked, got me up off my feet. He put his shoulder right through my chin. I thought I broke my jaw. I literally, he rocked me. That guy was solidly built. I can't imagine being a wide receiver.
When it was him and Sendejo on the back end, that was the most violent. I'd hate to say dirty because they weren't dirty, but they were just violent and old school. It's like when I hear the old time NBA players talk about Jeff Hornacek and John Stockton, they were like, those two white boys were bad. They were some bad boys.
Zimmer used to, on third down specifically, but a lot of times, he would squat his safeties right behind the sticks. He would play cover 4 and he would squat them right down and just let them come downhill. Just like any inbreakers, they were tuned up, ready for it. And you felt it. I think they had that 1 year. They set the record for best third down defense.
Well, Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks did a great job of carrying these tight ends and crossers. And oftentimes they were starting in that AA mug, which we've seen from Mike Zimmer so many times. And that allows or forces, depends on how you look at it, that back end to play more aggressively and play between two schemes.
All right, next one. Eagles defensive end Josh Sweat.
The Bears.
Dude, it just feels like he's a Bear because I'm going through. I mean, I could see the Patriots too. We haven't said the Patriots for a bunch of these. They have $1 zillion in cap space. They are 60. So you have to hit 89% of the cap floor over 4 years. They're currently at 64%. So they legitimately have to throw out almost $100 plus million of contracts this offseason. It just has to happen. And so when you're Josh Sweat and you're playing a valuable position that they need, I think he'd be one of your front runners for the Pats. So Pats or Bears? I wrote Bears though, ultimately, because the Bears are making some all-in moves. I think Ryan Poles sees some writing on the wall with the trades he's made and said, if things don't go so hot this year, I'm out the door. So he's going to put the pedal to the metal and be an active player this free agency because they can also they got $67 million cap space. If they want to take a page out of the Saints playbook, out of the Eagles playbook, and start converting some salary to bonus for some of their top guys, DJ Moore, Jalen Johnson, Montez Sweat, they can create almost $50 million of cap space with the snap of the fingers. They can be major players this year if they want to be. And which
is why the next player on the list, offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley. That's also an Irishman like yourself. I think he could have the Bears written on him too. Now they went and they got 2 guards in Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. Now they've got Darnell Wright at the right tackle spot. I love him. I think Drew Dahlman would be a great answer at the center position. If you dump the money into Drew Dahlman, will you then have the money to be able to pay the left tackle named Ronnie Stanley? Because you look at the draft and there's 2 guys that I think could be available there at the 10 spot. I think it's Banks, right? And Campbell. Those are the 2 tackles, right?
Yes. Well, Campbell's guard now.
Question marks about the arm length, and rightfully so. Yeah, he's a guard. Now, yesterday I would have said Will Campbell is going to be a Chicago Bear and he will play guard. Now I think that maybe Ronnie Stanley and Drew Dahlman are Bears, and they potentially go with a running back in that first-round pick. Ashton Genty's going to be available, and we know how Ben Johnson feels about these dynamic playmakers at the running back position.
All I know is that if Ronnie Stanley signs with the Ravens prior to free agency, he is costing himself boatloads of cash. Now, obviously, the guy is probably not hurting for money. He signed a big deal before. He's 31 years old. He's been with the Ravens his entire career.
Notre Dame guy, smart, takes care of his finances.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying what he should do. I'm saying if that guy was on the open market bidding between the Patriots and the Bears, 2 teams desperate for a left tackle, maybe the Bears not so much, but the Patriots for sure want a left tackle, gobs of cap space. He could go somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years, $50 million when it's all said and done, just because that's That's the desperation. That's
The
beauty of
Bears
free
had
agency.
young guy. The Bears had Braxton Jones out there, and he got a really bad leg injury last year. And when they put out the guys that are depth pieces, drafted guys by the Bears, they looked lost. They looked inept. No offense to these guys. Now they're going to have a new offensive line coach. They're going to have a brand new offense, all that stuff. So I anticipate that to be the tide that rises all ships. But you bring a guy like Ronnie Stanley in, and you know that like a ball of clay, he can just hop in there and do whatever he's got to do within the scheme. I don't trust that they have somebody, whether it be from a health standpoint or from a general skill standpoint, to get the job done at the level that they need to have success with that offense.
All right, next one, Eagles defensive tackle Milton Williams. Where will and where should? This one, to me, it's the same answer, both Arizona Cardinals. They have, I believe, the second most cap space or third most cap space right now of anyone in the NFL. And their DTs currently, Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, Dante Stills. That's your group. That's where you're sending through that door. They don't have a lot of money spent on this roster. They could go out and buy a couple nice pieces to add. That's where my eye is going. They just don't have that dude on that at that position. And
you've been saying this. You've been pounding the table for the Cardinals to get Milton Williams. And, I can totally see this happening. You mentioned my guy, Bilal Nichols. I play with him in Chicago. Good rusher. He can rush from the wide three. But, you need some more ass in there for first and second down. Milton Williams is that guy, and he can win on third. So I think it's an immediate upgrade to that room.
And then who's the DC when they drafted him in Philly? Jonathan Gannon. So all signs point to that. We'll see if it ends up coming to fruition. Last one, Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold. I have no handle on this one. I've been saying the Giants for a while, but they may be in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. I don't know, man. I the more I think about it, the more I don't know if anyone really gives him a big money deal. I think he might end up in like a 3 year 75.
I would say poor guy, but that's not the truth now, is it?
Yeah, right. No.
I think he's going to end up being on. If I am Sam Darnold, I am doing everything I can to end up on the Minnesota Vikings. I just think that the situation is so perfect there. And for those of us who didn't play in the league and don't have the idea of what it's like day in, day out to be a part of a building, a subculture, Minnesota has an elite one of those. And they've got a great young coach. They have success on the horizon. They have superstars on both sides of the football. I think that it would be the best spot for him. And if it's a difference between, let's just say, these are fake numbers. Let's say you get $10 million to stay in Minnesota versus $15 million to go to the New York Giants. I'm taking the $10 million. And I'm going to stay in Minnesota. And I'm going to compete with J.J. McCarthy. And if he does beat me out, good for us, good for him. And the check still clears. But I'll have an opportunity to then once again, if J.J. McCarthy, something happens, you get in there and play. And I can promise you that he's going to be better than bad. He's not going to be terrible. We saw throughout the course of the season, Sam Darnold do awesome things within the framework of this offense. I don't expect it to look any different. Yes, you would like him not to turn into a pumpkin at the very end of the season, but go take a look at the Super Bowl. Go take a look at any one of these games where the underdog won, and it was an ass whooping in those games. So it can happen to anybody. Nobody's immune to having bad days. Let's just hope that within Kevin O'Connell's offense, with that tutelage, he can have less of them.